The Cloud Foundry Foundation is our sponsor here for our podcast from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Santa Clara, California. Our discussion, the path emerging as organizations move beyond the confusion of disruption and take the journey to transformation. We'll explore the new concepts of multi-cloud and how it relates to open source app development and management at scale. Cloud Foundry gives companies the speed, simplicity, and control they need to develop and deploy applications faster and easier. Learn more about Cloud Foundry at cloudfoundry.org.
Hi, this is Lee Calcote with the New Stack. We're here at the Cloud Foundry Summit. I'm joined by some esteemed colleagues here, and I'll let you guys go around the table and give a quick intro.
Myself is Raju Penmetsa from Cloud Foundry, lead the technology strategy.
I'm Kyle MacDonald. I'm an advisor to the New Stack.
Scott Raney, a partner with RedPoint Ventures.
I'm Bhaskar Krishnamsetty, the Chief Product Officer of CloudFabrix.
Good deal. It's great to have you guys on the show. We just, we're on the second day of the summit, speaking with a few other folks who are visiting, but Raju and Bhaskar, I'm all excited to see you guys again. We got to spend some quality time together at Cisco, and you guys came in through the CloudFabrix acquisition. You guys since did a lot there, but you've moved on and you've moved into CloudFabrix, and so I haven't been able to keep up. What's the story at CloudFabrix?
Sure. So as you know, when we were at CloudFabrix, right? During Cisco acquisition, the focus of CloudFabrix, the platform, was pretty much infrastructure automation as well as private cloud, right? So at that time, we feel like we pretty much traveled with the cloud. So when we started in 2009, it's in very nascent stages, right? Then the infrastructure automation is a big deal, private cloud and all. So now the fast forward, cloud has matured. You can see from the keynotes, they're talking about multi-cloud and also the no more infrastructure, the whole application stack, right? So the CloudFabrix focus is now that, right? So you should be able to manage, govern, operate the entire application stack, no matter where you are running, right? So that is what CloudFabrix helps enterprises.
In addition to Bhaskar's, right, like in the modernization of your stacks in the form of a digital transformation, what you required is you need to see through the same problem through a different lens. In the past, before virtualization, the way we have saw the infrastructure versus with virtualization, it changed significantly. And that obsoleted certain technologies. I think this transformation is going to give the same kind of opportunities, and we want to help the customers during that transition of the journey from a traditional enterprise-focused applications into the new generation. How do they people process, and how do they transform that one?
So Scott, this is a great moment. How different does that sound to some of the pitch you heard when you did Heroku how many years ago?
It's probably been about 7 years. It's been a long time. It sounds a lot more mature and sophisticated than back in the Heroku days, which really was ultimately just an acknowledgement that Amazon, the management, the underlying Amazon service is still pretty complicated for developers, and they wanted to provide an abstraction layer to really speed up and simplify the deployment and management of applications. But clearly, the world has evolved in a very significant way. PaaS is more important now than ever. Enterprises are looking for PaaS solutions to help with their developer productivity and operational efficiency. And when you get to that level, the kinds of sophistication, the way you have to being able to integrate into the policy framework and security framework and the compliance framework that enterprises have is, it's not an easy thing to do. So obviously, companies like this are going to be very, very important going forward.
Are you thinking to yourself now, Salesforce got a great deal?
I felt that way for a long time. Yeah, I actually think that, I think that the potential in front of Heroku was very, very profound. But obviously, partnering with Salesforce was a great event for that company and helped Heroku become what it is today. So, it's maybe a little bit of a revisionist history. I don't know what would have happened if we remained independent, but I think we're all probably a little bit surprised, or maybe I'm a little bit surprised at just how big a deal PaaS has become over the years, and how much time and energy is being invested in that, by traditional enterprises. It's really gratifying to see.
Seems like there's been a journey there. Just as I think as Bhaskar was talking about as well, people have as they've come to understand the term cloud and define that over the last couple of years, and then finally either start with private initiatives or moving to public, and now we're, here at this summit, a big theme is, multi-cloud, and how does that story multi-cloud fit into kind of the focus that you guys have at RedPoint?
I think it's becoming. To be honest, for many years I thought multi-cloud was just like it was slideware. It's something that people felt like they needed to say because enterprises don't want to be locked in to any one individual infrastructure as a service, or frankly any one individual PaaS, which is something we should talk about, which is a challenge for the industry. But I thought it's really just lip service, but now I actually believe it's increasingly is something that enterprises are looking for, and a big part of that is if there's more infrastructure providers now that are building robust services, and I think enterprises recognize that there's any number that can provide sufficient quality, and now they want to have them compete on price and service and experience. And so I think it is, now is probably the time where, we've been talking about it a while, but where it really starts to matter.
So portability is part of that multi-cloud story, and kind of the promise that, kind of the vendor lock-in that you were talking about. How does portability play into kind of the focus that you guys have at CloudFabrix?
Yeah, sure. See, portability is one of the key aspects, right? Portability is one, and cost control is one. That the main thing what we are observing with our customers and all, they're ready to move to the cloud. The main hindrance they are looking, if they can have the same governance, security, and control, right? So that is one of the biggest inhibitors we are finding out. And with Docker and Docker technology, especially that option, I think the portability has become a little easier. But still, the biggest hindrance what we are hearing from enterprises is still the governance and the security and the control, operational control aspects.
I think in addition to what Bhaskar said, what we have been observing or learning from our customer discussions as well as the private betas also, in the past, it used to be addressed in a piece-by-piece meal. And now they're feeling that we are at a point where we need to understand the holistic system from an application point of view rather than a VM or a compute or a storage resource point of view. And whenever we talk about an application, this is the one essentially you're driving your business, and that's what they mostly care about. Most of the developer focus is in that area as well. And when we do that one, and portability is one aspect, and how do we enable the existing set of people to manage the existing infrastructure and move on to the new set of infrastructure and the new set of applications most predominantly. That's where mostly we are seeing through that.
Yeah, just one more point. You're right. I mean, portability point of view, if you remember the old days, back in CloudFabrix days, there are a lot of combinations, V2V, P2V, V2V, all these things, right? So definitely this containerization has helped that portability aspect.
I gotta say, this is surreal for me, just sitting here with Bhaskar and Raju, where we, at Cisco just had between our products that had such a focus on, kind of IaaS and the days of sort of, to use Gartner's term, kind of the mode one, kind of, VMs and all infrastructure automation. And then, over time, even the products that we were leading there, they started to transition towards more of an application-centric focus, and actually application-centric maybe being kind of a term, beholden to Cisco. But, Scott, how has, the notion that we're on the other side of that journey, and we've begun to focus more on developers and how they maybe even define the infrastructure and the application needs that they have, how they're building apps?
Yeah, no, I think it's there's a number of ways of answering that question, but I think in the end, what we're realizing here is that this is really a service that should be delivered to developers and ops folks, and from a developer standpoint, they want the ability to have a very streamlined process of deploying applications, and that goes way beyond just firing up an AMI or an instance or leveraging S3 or whatever. I mean, those are kind of component services that are important, but ultimately the complexity of deploying applications goes much higher than that. And I think the result is that there's a greater demand, I think, particularly as applications were moving beyond the first initial adopters of PaaS. I think we're delivering a lot of web-based applications, which frankly things like compliance and policy management, all this stuff really weren't that important. Now we're deploying critical applications, enterprise-driven applications, where these kind of elements become increasingly important. And I think what we're doing is now we're really, instead of catering to the average web developer. We're trying to cater to the enterprise developer, and that's a big part of what this whole conference is about, and it's a big part, I think, of what these guys are trying to solve. So, and that's exciting to see.
We were talking earlier about kind of this notion of a top-down driven approach to getting to a PaaS system or getting to like a Cloud Foundry system that it's been kind of interesting to watch some of those enterprises, how they go to adopt and whether or not those things are kind of a bottoms up grassroots sort of adoption, and how the developers choose what technologies are being used versus kind of a top down mandate or kind of a mix. And so are you guys seeing any of that type of?
I think in that one, right, like it should not be a mandate, and it is driven based on the application serving the business, and that should drive the force behind it. And there are two theories to it, right? And a lot of people are coming from bottom up, and this is the infrastructure, this is what I support, this is what you should use. And instead of that, if you see the complete opposite of it, where people say, I am running a business of this, and for this, I need this application to cut down a time somebody come to my store or wait in the line. That's what their business objective, to increase the revenue. And when you come to that one, what technologies support the bottom, this should drive from the top. If you have a model where you come from the bottom and top, you need to meet in the middle somewhere, automatically finding out where it fits the better. We think the application abstraction is essential, mandatory for that one. When you do this more complex environments and heterogeneous across the multi-cloud, the way you said, right, and across Amazon, across Cloud Foundry and various things, we are increasing a dimension to our operations teams to understand the more complexity involved in a more involvement of our funding and ongoing maintenance. That's where we needed to bring these things together by putting an abstraction at the application layer, not at the bottom layer. And higher the abstraction, you have much better control. The lower abstraction, you'll have a lot less control.
The one challenge with the higher the abstraction layer is, if it's not done right, the more proprietary the platform becomes.
Yes.
And that's the biggest challenge, I think, that the PaaS ecosystem has right now, is kind of figuring out where that dividing line is, and ultimately how opinionated you want to be, how structured you want to be in building and composing these PaaSes. And I think that's still very much a work in progress.
That's
it's one of the challenges that's in front of the industry. So.
Agreed. I mean, this multi-cloud thing, it is not just cloud. Multi-platform, multi-technology, that choice is pretty key, right? So, and one more thing, I mean, good point is this top-down versus bottom-up approach. Always, you don't adopt technology for the sake of adoption. Everybody else is doing it, right? You need to first define your business outcomes, business objectives, operational outcomes. Then you need to figure out whether any particular technology is fitting into that or not, right? That's why this top-down approach, and especially in CloudFabrix, we really emphasize on outcomes-driven transformation. Whatever technology, whatever cloud you adopt, then it is easier to even business guys, everybody to come down to that.
So are you guys agnostic to the underlying PaaS, or how do you approach that? Because I think, I have a slightly different perspective, which is I think ultimately the tools that are going to be most successful here are the ones that the developers and the DevOps community are going to embrace, because I believe those are inexorable trends that are going to transform how software is built within enterprises, even Fortune 100 enterprises. And that could mean that developers are playing a much bigger role in determining what PaaS or what the construct is that these applications are being deployed on top of. So how do you guys approach that?
Yeah, so definitely vendor agnostic. Basically, our platform sits on top of any of these PaaS and clouds, what we call as a digital governance platform, right? So developers or operators can choose either the PaaS or a PaaS or cloud.
See, to expand on Bhaskar's, right, when you say PaaS and you're kind of bucketizing to only the set of applications run on PaaS, in an enterprise, and you have your traditionally, which is developed for many, many years, maybe decade, and it won't happen overnight transforming to a cloud native or a PaaS application. Yeah. And our focus is, how does these work together to deliver the business service? That's where the abstraction we are trying to focus in. When we say the abstraction we are focusing in there, we want to understand the entire stack, and in a top-down rather than bottom-up. And if there is a system where it gives a bottom-up, and we'll match in the middle in the sense like where it fits the better.
I can see from a top-down perspective that the terms policy and governance are very much so sort of comfort terms for those organizations as they look to what they need to do and how they can control that. I tend to fall, I think, on towards the side that Scott's on. I'm actually authoring a book, and the title is Developer Defined Infrastructure. In this case, it's using CoreOS Tectonic, and it's kind of about Kubernetes and that type of a land. But I tend to, I think some of my experience as well is sort of hailed from the notion that you really want to facilitate the developer's productivity. That said, I've been in enterprise organizations where there's been a real kind of conflict between trying to facilitate and provide an innovative environment, but then also, hand that over ultimately to the ops end, to the IT end, and and give them a sense of control and.
Well, I mean, let's face it. If you're a developer, you don't really want to be told what tools to use and how to use them and what rules and be home by midnight, right? You really want to have some freedom to go do kind of whatever you want, right? And so, it's whatever the best tool is, right? Should I write this in Haskell? Should I write it in something else? That's a choice you as a developer get to make, right? And so I think probably what some of one of the reasons why we're seeing PaaS sort of evolve and become more of a focal point is because it lets an organization, frankly, give those tools up and sort of say, here, we'll manage the infrastructure for you. It's the thing behind the scenes. Your corporate overlord takes care of that problem, but you, developer, right, this is your safe space.
I guess not to put words in your mouths, but it seems like that's a problem you guys can help solve, right? Which is you can allow developers to make whatever decisions they want, but in the end, there's a set of policies that have to be complied with at the application level. And if you guys can help enforce those policies, and developers can do whatever they want. Right. It almost unleashes developers to do what they want as opposed to kind of force them through a particular path.
Exactly. 2 points I want to add on to. The first one is why we can't stick with one PaaS, right? Because when we are talking about these PaaS platforms and all, mostly we are talking about the cloud-native app development or the greenfield applications. But if you really look at the enterprises, 70 to 80% are business-critical, traditional .NET, Java-based, or Oracle, SAP, right? They were not architected keeping cloud in mind. So we need to figure out what is the right platform or technology for them to transform. So that is number one. Number two, the governance and the security, this operational performance aspect, it can be afterthought in a traditional sense because it's in your control, right? GRC can be afterthought. But now, the governance should be ingrained into the platform. Right? Should always be monitored, always be governed, always be operated.
I think when we come to the governance, right, and as both of you mentioned, one is the security people from an infrastructure point of view, application point of view, as well as the infrastructure offers certain services. All of these, you're setting appropriate boundaries in the form of governance, and this is what is supported, this is how it should be done. And the platform will take care of that from that point onwards. And to empower the developers to flexibly deploy as well as connect to the existing applications without breaking the boundaries or breaking the bank.
Yep. I guess I have a question for you. You raised the idea of more traditional architected applications versus cloud native applications. Mm-hmm. If you think about in the Fortune 2000, new application builds, what percent of them are going to be cloud native versus architected in the more traditional way? I mean, how is that going to evolve over time?
How is that
going to evolve? What are you hearing from enterprises now? Are they starting to think about building cloud-native applications?
Yes.
Yes, they are talking about it. They are talking and they are investing in that one. Let's say if you talk to the large financial customers, say some to name is the large big ones, right? And the developer shops are maybe bigger than some of our IT shops or the companies. And we think the transformation takes at least few years. And they're thinking, they have started investing in it. It is a few-year journey. But the question is, once they go to that one, do they maintain both of them? Do they throw away what they have? And what we personally believe, what we're learning is they're not going to throw away both at the same time. How do they transform from here to there? Yeah. And one large financial firm executive quoted that there are not a whole lot of Ubers, and I can freshly lights on and turn the technology into a company, and I have existing system to manage as well as transform the business.
Speaking of financial organizations, I spent some time with a couple of the largest ones here most recently, and actually one in particular that they're, they've got a cloud division. They've got this kind of IaaS, PaaS type approach to how it is that they're providing infrastructure and services to their application developers. And, what I was noticing internally, just sort of kind of a power struggle actually between the IT organizations that are responsible for putting this up, between kind of the polar ends of what we've just been talking about, Scott, and that's letting sort of the on one end there's this power and overlording from Kyle, kind of control that the IT organization doesn't necessarily want to let go of, and it's sort of a if you build it, they will come type model, and kind of the belief that we're going to define that, we're going to control it. Once we built it, ultimately those developers will come. Versus on the other end is more of a developer advocacy sort of, let's engage with them, figure out what they need, show them how they can use it, let their feedback and guidance kind of influence and steward what our technological choices are. For me, it's been particularly around container orchestrators. And so here at the Cloud Foundry Summit, just I guess part of that question that I wanted to pose to you guys is how does kind of Cloud Foundry fit into your focus and part of that decision, part of that spectrum of choice?
Yeah, so I think you are kind of alluding to this bimodal IT kind of a phenomenon, right? Definitely, I know some are being advocating that. We don't believe in that because that creates the conflict and warring between different groups, right? Shadow IT versus the traditional IT and all. Definitely, there must be some flat platforms which can unify this, right? Not only cater to modern app development, but also help transform these business critical applications. And we believe Cloud Foundry is one of those platforms where it is not only focusing on the cloud native and microservices kind of a development, but it also thinking of how to transform this business, how to port these business critical applications into that.
In addition to Bhaskar's comment, as late as yesterday, we are talking to a customer. They tried to follow a model where the new generation and the existing one, and what they felt after a journey of like 18 months were like the teams were not working together. They are fighting with each other more than they're working together to resolve the problem.
Got it.
Well, just on that real quick. I mean, it seems like Cloud Foundry is the passive choice for the IT organization. The real question is it the passive choice for the developer, and what is that going to look like over time? And it seems like there's a whole series of companies that are putting together very compelling developer value chains that offer, maybe a better ease of use, more flexibility, ability to choose your components all the way up and down the stack. That represent a real existential threat for them if you believe developers ultimately will be making decisions about what these platforms are going to be. And so, I think that's one of the challenges that the Cloud Foundry ecosystem has. But I also think it is the preeminent open source PaaS movement. And if there's a company that's well positioned to try to bridge that gap, it would be these guys. So.
I think that's a very insightful perspective. And I may be reading between the lines here, but when you take a look at the cultures of the organizations that are backing, like the Cloud Foundry initiative or other PaaS systems, there's in my mind, and again maybe I'm inferring too much here, but in my mind there's a significant we were talking about the spectrum of developer defined versus sort of top down. There seems to be kind of an alignment there between the culture of the organizations. Does that resonate for you guys, or am I crazy?
Culture of what organizations?
So the ones that are the most prominent ones, like sponsoring and backing this particular summit, and or the OpenShifts and the Red Hats and other PaaS systems, and kind of take a look at their cultures and their models to how they operate. Okay, well, I'm reading between the lines there.
I mean, it's clearly like if you look at the companies that are back, it's the more traditional enterprise-oriented companies that have built stacks and solutions for IT organizations for decades, right? And it's an incredibly valuable perspective. And the reality is, all these developer-oriented solutions that are coming from the bottoms up are not ready, for the average Fortune 500 company right now because they can't support the kinds of requirements that you guys have laid out here earlier. So. It'll be interesting to see how this evolves.
But I think they are converging, as you said, right? Even if you look at Cisco and HPs of the world, they are embracing a lot of these open source technologies and trying to offer their stacks on top of it, right? So, I mean, that's a good sign that enterprises and these open source, vendors are coming together.
Well, very good. Well, gentlemen, we're about halfway through the summit. Thanks for joining us this morning. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
The Cloud Foundry Foundation is our sponsor here for our podcast from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Santa Clara, California. Our discussion, the path emerging as organizations move beyond the confusion of disruption and take the journey to transformation. We'll explore the new concepts of multi-cloud and how it relates to open source app development and management at scale. Cloud Foundry gives companies the speed, simplicity, and control they need to develop and deploy applications faster and easier. Learn more about Cloud Foundry at cloudfoundry.org.